Okay, 3, 2, 1. Richard Timpson, thank you so much for your time. Can you hear me? Oh, I can't hear you. I think your audio is in mute.
Classic.
There
Yeah,
we
is that
go.
any better? Perfect.
Yes, perfect. Okay,
yeah,
so before,
how is Posadas, Bella?
but oh,
How is Argentina?
It's hot. It's hot.
Okay.
Very hot.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's very expensive.
Okay.
Not for us. If we come with dollars, it's all good.
Yeah.
But for people from Argentina, it's terrible. The economy is pretty bad.
Yeah.
So so people need your help more than ever. I know you have been helping many of my students in the last few weeks. I received amazing feedback, so thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for obviously this space. As you are aware, everybody have gone crazy with what immigration has stated. So we need your wise words. I know that some people have said that it's been like a marketing strategy for the government to put something out there because they were getting a lot of pressure from the government.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, I know that some changes are already a reality, and some we hope that will not. But I'll let you talk.
Perfect, thank you. And this is probably the first time I've ever done a webinar at 9 p.m. in the evening, so it's really good to see that there's so many people on here, and thank you all for coming. Bella, just before I get into it, I've got a little bit of a paper to present. I might just give it a go in terms of being able to screen share, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Perfect. It's quite a long paper. There's about 25 pages in it in total. What I can do is I'll put my email address at the end of the paper. So if people want to get the paper afterwards, I'm happy to email it through to them if they just send me an email, if that's okay.
Okay, cool. Is this a paper like in regards like with updates and stuff?
Yeah. So it's pretty much what I'm going to talk about. What actually happened in terms of the release of the migration strategy last week was that they issued a 100-page document that formed the basis of the strategy. So I've just summarized it down to around 25 pages.
Cool.
I don't know if everyone wants to be here until midnight tonight, but I think probably just trying to keep it down to about half an hour to an hour in terms of
of course. Yeah.
I'll summarize it. I'm probably not going to bore everyone with 25 pages as such, but let me share a screen and I'll speak.
And I'll just explain just in case what you just said.
Thank you.
Entonces, obviamente, el gobierno sacó la estrategia, o sea, el documento de la estrategia son como 100 páginas. Entonces, Richard lo que hizo fue un resumen en 20 páginas. Vamos a tratar de hablar de las cosas más importantes, pero después al final de la charla él va a dejar su mail. Si alguien quiere recibir esto que él va a presentar ahora, en la imagen de la pantalla va a aparecer y él va a ir explicando las cosas más importantes. Si alguien quiere que se lo mande, simplemente le manda un mail y él le reenvía el resumen. Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so can you see my document presenting at this stage, and can you see and hear me, Bella?
No, I can hear you, but I can't see. Yes.
Okay, it says it's sharing, but that's okay. I mean, look.
¿El resto puede ver el documento que subió Richard? A ver si alguno me responde.
No, por el momento no.
No, it says it's sharing a window, but it might just be that I'm not the host of the meeting or whatever it is. But look, I'm happy to share my email address. I will speak through the paper as we go through.
Because you did share it last time.
Yeah, but probably the last time it wasn't as big a document as it is on this occasion.
Oh, okay.
Anyway,
okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can read it and then.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Okay, great. So look, we've had a really long expected update with respect to the migration program. We knew that this was coming. We really knew that it was coming since about the election of the new government. It's taken them you know, over 2 years really in which to get to this point. So we had a major announcement on the 11th of December with respect to changes to the migration program, not just in the next year, but really over the next 10 years in terms of horizon. So I'm sure you guys have heard all sorts of stories with respect to what's changing, you know, that the sky is falling in and all this sort of stuff. I think that the way that the strategy needs to be looked at is that it is heavily political in terms of why they brought it out at this stage. And I think there's actually a whole lot of positives in the document as well from your perspectives, given that most of you, I think, are probably in the student visa or working holiday cycle as such. So I think we just need to view it in that context, Bella, in the sense that as much as they're making noises with respect to changing student visa programs, there's actually a lot of really good changes that are coming as well that I think will help people.
Cool. Sí,
Okay.
es lo que en cierta manera estaba diciendo. El gobierno de este momento en Australia podría venir a ser considerado como un gobierno más populista, por así decirlo. Y se dice como que sacaron esto porque estaban teniendo mucha presión del gobierno, de la oposición, y es como que dijeron, bueno, ok, saco esto, este es el plan, pero como que es todo bastante político. Entonces, sí van a haber muchos cambios, algunos van a ser positivos, otros esperemos que para la visa de estudiantes sobre todo no sean los que se espera, pero bueno, en sí es como que trataron como que de sacar todo esto ahora a fin de año, y hay que ver cuándo realmente se convierte en realidad. Así que bueno, yes, go ahead.
Perfect. Okay, so there are 8 arms to the migration strategy in terms of what these changes will be. I won't speak through everyone because everyone will not be relevant to the group here today. But I'm just going to go through the main ones. Okay, so the first one is that the government has effectively indicated that it's going to cease the 482 visa program and replace it with a skills and demand visa sometime next year. Okay. In addition to that, they're going to change substantially the points test that forms the basis of access to the independent skill visa programs. Do you want me to stop there, Bella?
Yes. So,
Yeah.
so it will no longer be called 482, but there will be some elements on the 482 on that new program.
Yeah,
We'll
definitely.
have a new name.
Yeah, and I think, look, it'll be completely different to what it is. So effectively what's going to happen is that the existing 482 program, which is an employer-nominated program with a capacity to transition to permanent residency, that will be abolished to new applications. For people that hold that visa already, it's completely fine. We'll still be able to transition to permanent residency. But for new people that are seeking to access a similar visa, there will be a new visa introduced in 2024 to implement this new strategy from the government's perspective.
Will it be, so there's no date as to when this will be introduced?
Yeah, there's no specific date at the moment. I will get to that in a second, if that's okay. And
Yeah,
I'll
that's
sort of
okay.
speak to when things are going to happen. I think there's going to be 3 streams in this new visa. We're likely to see 2 of those streams in 2024. The third stream, which is going to be principally focused on the care and support industries, we think it's probably going to be in the next 3 years before we see that come into place.
Okay, so the 482 will no longer be 482.
Yeah.
But there'll be like it will have like 3 streams.
Yeah.
The 2 of them will come through probably 2024. So if people apply for the 482 before these changes, it's all good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Entonces, la 482, que es la más popular en este momento, se supone la visa de trabajo, la 482, que es la visa que vos podés sacar si sos nominado por un empleador, la van a sacar y va a ser como una nueva visa con 3 áreas, que eso es lo que 2 áreas, lo más probable es que estos cambios pasen en el 2024, el tercer como camino, por así decirlo, el tercer área de este tipo de visa de trabajo, recién para el seguramente 2025. Entonces, ahora Richard va a explicar bien cómo va a ser cada camino. Las personas que tengan la 482 o que apliquen en la 482 antes de los cambios van a estar todo bien, no va a haber ningún inconveniente. Va a ser obviamente para una vez que empiece a regir el cambio. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, and I'm going to get into a little bit of detail in a second with
Yeah.
respect to what that's going to look like. So on top of that, we're going to have a new points test as well. So I think that's going to be interesting, and I think it would actually help a lot of people in terms of being able to score more in a points test based around their overall contribution to society. So the government haven't indicated yet exactly what that's going to look like, but there's definitely going to be substantial changes in the formulation of the points test. As you'll know, the points test is a requirement for a lot of the skilled independent visas, such as a 491 visa, a 190 visa, and a 189 as well.
Oh, entonces va a haber como un nuevo sistema de testeo de puntos, como ustedes saben, para muchas visas. Vos tenés que, en cierta manera, responder ciertas preguntas de tu experiencia laboral, tu edad, tu experiencia en Australia, fuera de Australia, tus títulos previos. Va a haber un nuevo sistema de puntos. Todavía no se sabe bien cómo van a ser, pero se espera que esto realmente ayude en vez de que lo haga más complicado. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I think the next one is probably the one that everyone is most familiar with and possibly concerned about, and that's changes to the international student sector as such. And I'll speak about that in a second in terms of what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. You know, I'm certainly hearing a lot of anxious voices with respect to the changes and how they're going to affect people. I think that we need to look at everything holistically and see the opportunity that the new visas are going to give people in terms of moving away longer term from student visas. So I think it's not all doom and gloom in that respect. So on top of that, Bella, there's going to be a significant refocus of the visa program towards funneling applicants into regional Australia. That's always been a big function of the government, but I think before Christmas there's going to be a new priority processing direction with respect to giving the highest priority to regional applications. So longer term, if people are interested in moving into or staying in the regions, they will be processed on a priority basis where that's the case.
So in regards to regional,
Yeah.
would it be like regional, any city that's not Sydney, Brisbane, and Melbourne?
Yeah,
or,
pretty much. Yeah.
Or regional.
I think it would be based on what the definition of regional is. So the definition of regional is pretty much anywhere with the exception of the metropolitan cities on the eastern seaboard as such. So, you know, it could be the Gold Coast, it could be the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, for example. You know, it could be other places as well. So nothing has really changed. Like, that's always been the case. But I think what they're doing is they're repurposing the program to make it even more likely for people that are in a regional area to get supported from a visa perspective. So it's actually good news. Yeah.
Y bueno, y va a haber como también, en realidad no un nuevo cambio, pero van a dar como más prioridad y va a haber como más énfasis en todas las personas que vayan a trabajar y o estudiar en las zonas regionales. Que obviamente que es lo que quiere el gobierno, lo que quiere tratar es que la gente se vaya de las grandes ciudades, y cuando hablamos de regionales, hablamos cualquier lugar que no sea Sydney, Brisbane y Melbourne. Entonces, se espera algo que van a avisar antes de Navidad, pero en realidad esto siempre fue así, pero tratar de dar como más prioridad y más beneficios si está fuera de estas tres ciudades. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'll get into more detail in a second on each of those. But I think the two other major changes that are going to happen is they're going to relook at the working holiday visa program with a view to the requirement to undertake specified work in a regional area. So that's being looked at. And I think really significantly from everyone's perspective, they're going to introduce guaranteed service processing timeframes and standards with respect to visas. So we're going to start to see visa processing get much quicker than it has been. I don't know what your experience has been like, but, you know, sometimes it's been that we've been waiting months, you know, in which to get decisions for the new visa program. We're looking in some cases at getting decisions within 7 to 21 days, and that's a guaranteed service standard. So I think that's a really major reform if they're able to introduce it.
Yeah, I feel like it depends. There's some weeks that I get like 20 visas granted in a week. And now it's been, I think, 2 weeks that I haven't heard from immigration. I did notice that it's been quicker.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes it gets, some weeks are like many visas coming through, and then for weeks I haven't heard from immigration. So
I know.
yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I will explain this. No, después es simplemente el tema de que inmigración va a tratar de apresurar el proceso de visa para muchas visas. Hay muchos que aplicamos a su visa y todavía están esperando. Obviamente están en Australia, pueden seguir teniendo las condiciones de su visa actual, así que no afecta, pero van a establecer como un proceso mucho más rápido, creo que sobre todo para las visas de skills y también las postgraduate visas, que puedas tener respuesta, sobre todo para las skills visas con salario más alto. No se preocupen que ahora va a explicar detalle por detalle cada cosa, pero en sí, ahora esta sección lo que estaba diciendo era eso, que inmigración va a tratar de establecer un sistema donde ciertas visas las puedan aprobar en 21 días, o sea, que sea todo el proceso mucho más rápido. Es lo que esperan. De ahí a que se haga una realidad, eso es lo que están diciendo que va a pasar. Yes.
Perfect. And, look, the cynic in me would probably say that I've heard all this before in terms of, processing times. We had similar undertakings previously for the Global Talent Program. I think the difference on this occasion is they're actually serious about it. And it's a service standard as opposed to sort of a promise to have really quick processing. So, let's hope that they're able to live up to what they're proposing here. Okay, great. So look, what I might do, just from the point of view of getting into the main issues that I think people will be concerned with concerning these changes, is really just what actual reforms are occurring with respect to the various visa programs. So there's so much in the document that's been released of interest. I think what's going to be really significant from the point of view of someone that's going to be moving into skilled employment, which, hopefully most of you guys will be, is that they're changing the requirement concerning changing employers. So, at the moment, if you're on a 482 visa, for example, and you lose your job, there's a very short period of time in which to transition to a new employer. Otherwise, you could face cancellation. So there is a much longer period now going to be introduced, a period of 180 days as such. So I think that's a much more of a significant concession for someone in that situation. I think what's really amazing about what they're proposing, and I think it will be of interest to probably everyone here, is at the moment, to get to permanent residency from a 482 visa, we need to have the same sponsor, pretty much sponsoring us for the purposes of getting a 186 visa to transition to. As part of the proposed reforms, we will apparently be able to self-sponsor for the purpose of getting that permanent component once we're on a skilled in demand visa as such. So we apparently won't need a sponsor in which to be able to get to permanent residency after about 2 years. So I think that's a really big change.
So if you're on the skills on demand, but specific with a specific salary, or any?
Yeah. So I'll talk about that in a second, Bella. So there's there's 3 streams to that visa that are going to be But at the moment, as you know, like, to get to permanent residency, you need to be sponsored by the same employer that sponsored you for the 482 visa. So that's going to change. Basically, what's going to happen, as I understand it anyway, is that people won't need to have the employer to transition to permanent residency. They'll be able to do it themselves without the employer. So I think that's
so it'd be like what we talked about last time. So after 2 years, on the new 482,
the skills in the
186.
Or whatever it's going to be. But the major reform is that we won't need the employer to support us for that application.
Cool.
Whereas at the moment we do, and the concern is that it creates an imbalance in the relationship between the employee and the employer. So it's basically giving people more independence, and I think that's a fantastic reform if it comes through.
Did you say it's 180 days if you lose your sponsor?
Absolutely. So it's 180 days, which is like
180.
180 days,
Cool. I'll just explain that.
Thank you.
Entonces, ahora voy a empezar a detallar cambio por cambio. Entonces, uno de los cambios que se esperan, como todos saben, cuando vos tenés una visa de sponsor que dependés de un empleador, se crea como no es común, pero pasa muchísimo, como un imbalance, por así decirlo, porque el empleador es como que dice, yo te tengo a vos, vos vas a hacer lo que yo quiera, te pago lo que quiero, porque si vos no estás trabajando conmigo, no vas a poder sacar una residencia. Entonces, ahora el nuevo cambio que se espera es que en caso que vos te quieras ir, porque muchas veces lo que pasa es vos querés dejar tu sponsor y te sentís atado porque tenés un tiempo muy corto de encontrar un nuevo sponsor para no perder la visa. Entonces, con el nuevo cambio vas a tener 180 días para conseguir un nuevo sponsor si dejas el trabajo donde estás trabajando, ¿no? Y que no vas a necesitar ahora, con la ley como está, vos tenés que tener 2 años con la visa, por ejemplo, la 482, y necesitas el apoyo de tu empleador para sacar por ejemplo, la 186, la visa permanente. Entonces, con estos nuevos cambios, vos no vas a necesitar el apoyo de tu empleador para poder sacarla. Entonces, no te vas a sentir atado, ni ese empleador te va a tener así atado, porque vos no vas a depender, como en este momento sí o sí dependés de ellos para poder sacar la permanente. Yes.
Okay, perfect. And there's just one more thing I want to add before I get into the new visa itself, if it's okay. So at the moment, we have this thing called a SAF levy, or a Skilling Australia Fund levy. It's a fee that's an upfront payment that an employer needs to make to participate in the 482 visa program. It can be a significant payment that the employer needs to make. It's often, in my experience, a disincentive from an employer's perspective to agree to sponsor someone because they have to pay all this money up front. So the change that is coming, that instead of requiring employers to pay up front, is that we'll have a trailing fee circumstance. So we just pay a fee every year rather than paying everything up front. So I think that will make a big difference in relation to potential sponsors' willingness to support someone for the purposes of this new visa.
Do you know what the cost is?
Yeah, it's around $1,200 per annum, but it depends on the amount of years that we're seeking to get the visa for. So say, for example, we nominate someone at the moment for a 482 visa, it might be then $5,000 or $6,000 that the employer has to pay this, not the employee, but they have to pay that on an upfront basis before we lodge the nomination.
Yep.
And it's just, sometimes when they're faced with then having to pay all this money, it can be sort of a disincentive to them to support someone. So the new change is to make it easier on employers to pay that money over the lifetime of the visa rather than an upfront basis. So I think that's going to be a huge improvement in terms of getting employers to be, interested in supporting people for these visas.
Cool. Entonces, para que un empleador te pueda sponsorear la visa, tiene que pagar un costo para poder sponsorearte, y se paga todo de una. Entonces, esto muchas veces es algo que hace que un empleador no quiera sponsorear tu visa. Entonces, ahora otro cambio que se espera es que vos puedas pagar ese costo que tenés que pagar para poder sponsorear a alguien, que lo paga el empleador, no la persona, se pueda pagar como en partes, lo que va a hacer de que las empresas tengan más incentivo de querer y poder sponsorearte, porque ahora como es todo de una, muchos dicen, no, yo no tengo ganas de estar cubriendo esos costos. Entonces, este es otro cambio que va a motivar a empleadores a querer meterse en este programa de visa y sponsorear visas. Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I want to move on, and I want to talk about this new visa that's coming, because I think, it could be amazing and it could be of real benefit to a lot of people here today. So I just want to focus on that, if that's okay for a while, Bella. So the visa itself I've spoken generally about. There's going to be 3 streams in the visa itself. I want to talk about the first pathway, which is what's called the specialist skills pathway. So what's interesting about this change is that, as probably everybody knows, we previously worked on the basis of occupations lists, and if your occupation wasn't on the list, it wasn't generally possible to get a 482 visa. That's all going to change. So firstly, in the specialist skills pathway, there is no occupations list associated with that. So provided the salary is in excess of $135,000, that's a pretty big salary, but nonetheless, and provided it's not a trade-based role, there can then be scope to get this particular visa as well. So I think that's a massive change, and those visas will be processed within around 7 to 21 days as such.
So $135,000 per year.
Per annum, yeah. Yeah. And no occupations list.
So from 135 and no occupation list.
Absolutely.
But it's not available for trades.
Yeah, and so the next stream,
which I know that a lot of people complain because a lot of tradies make a lot of money. So they should be on this list.
They should be, and the reason they're not on the list is political, I think, because they don't want to be seen to be bringing in tradespersons from overseas, potentially taking Australian tradespersons' jobs, and unions might be concerned about that and all that sort of stuff. But there's still an option for tradespeople, and I'll talk about that in a second.
I'll just explain this.
Yeah.
Okay, so so one more thing is, when will this come about? We don't know.
They haven't given us an exact time frame, but they're very clear in the strategy document to say that it will be implemented in 2024.
Okay, entonces, como dijimos al principio, lo que se conoce como las visas de trabajo las van a tratar de hacerlas más fácil, por así decirlo. Hoy en día hay 20.000 subclases. Entonces, para tratar de hacer son 3 caminos. ¿Cuándo va a ser esto un hecho? Todavía no hay una fecha, pero se estima que va a ser para el 2024. Todavía no hay fecha. ¿Cuál es el primer stream, el primer área, por así decirlo, de estas nuevo tipo de visa? Se va a llamar la Specialist Skill Pathway. ¿Qué pasa con esta visa? No va a haber una lista de ocupación, como hoy en día que tenés que nominar una ocupación para poder sacar una visa de trabajo. En esta no va a haber. ¿Cuál va a ser el requisito? Ganar mínimo $135,000 por año. Está habiendo todo un tema con la gente que trabaja en los trades, que vendrían a ser carpinteros, pintores, porque son personas que ganan mucha plata en Australia, pero ahí dice Richard que va a haber un tema político, porque obviamente, como saben, en Australia no sos australiano si no tenés la camionetita de construcción. Entonces piensan que si este tipo de visa está disponible para tradies del extranjero, se va a llenar y no van a darle prioridad a los australianos, le van a sacar los trabajos a los australianos. Entonces, con este pathway, lo importante es, no tenés que tener una ocupación, obviamente vas a tener que cumplir ciertos requisitos de experiencia, pero el mínimo vas a tener que estar ganando un salario de $135,000 por año. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. And that's still a big salary, but nonetheless, I think it's a big change over what we've got at the moment. So the second pathway, Bella, is what's called the core skills pathway. Now this one is really interesting. So to access that pathway, we need to be paid at or above $70,000. There will be an occupation list for that. It will be different to what we have at the moment. But what I think is really interesting, and I'm just going to read out directly from their document, if that's okay. So it says, unlike the specialist skills pathway, trades workers, machinery operators, and drivers and laborers will be eligible under the core skills pathway, subject to being identified on the core skill occupations list. So if that's the case, at the moment, we can't nominate drivers, laborers, for a lot of machinery operation work under the 482 visa program. We generally need to go to a labor agreement for those type of occupations.
Yeah.
So it looks like from the language in it that they're certainly going to broaden out the base of occupations that we can use to access it. So I think that could be really interesting for a lot of people who have those sort of skills. And if we can access the program this way, there's a guaranteed pathway to permanent residency on a self-sponsorship basis after 2 years as well.
And it's 70,000, you said?
Yeah, 70K.
And, in regards to the specialist skilled pathway, I forgot to ask, that you need to be sponsored as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cool. I'll just explain this.
Yeah,
okay. Entonces, con el otro camino es que creo que mucha gente es el más común, por así decirlo, es el Core Skills Pathway, que sí voy a escribirlo acá, va a haber una Occupation List, o sea, tenés que nominar una ocupación, tenés que ganar mínimo $70,000 por año. Lo que es positivo con esto es que hasta el momento, para una 482, por ejemplo, si eras obrero, no podías sacarla. Si eras conductor, no podías sacarla. Con este nuevo pathway, no podía sacarla a menos que el gobierno haga un acuerdo con la industria. Como saben, en este momento hay un acuerdo entre la industria de aged care y el gobierno que permite que ciertas personas que estudien individual support puedan acceder a una visa de trabajo y hacer el camino migratorio. Lo mismo pasaba si eras obrero, si eras operador de algunas máquinas, no tenías chance. Con este nuevo camino vas a poder lograrlo. Mientras que tu ocupación esté en la lista y ganes un salario de mínimo $70,000 por año. Yes.
Okay, perfect. And then the third stream is not going to happen next year, but I think possibly the year after. And obviously, I think the year after is probably an election cycle year, but that's what's called the essential skills pathway. And again, the essential skills pathway is going to be a really focused pathway with respect to people working in the care and support industries, being paid salaries from around $50,000 to $70,000 per annum. So, you know, anyone that's doing care and support qualifications or from a care and support background, it looks like finally that they're going to be provided with a pathway with respect to getting onto one of these visas with the capacity then to transition to permanent residency in the future, which is really promising. At the moment, the only way we can really do that in a lot of cases is through a 482 labour agreement, which is very cumbersome in which to do it. So, you know, assuming this happens, I think it's a really positive development.
So it'd be like disability, individual support,
Yeah,
aged care,
absolutely.
nursing.
Yeah. No, so nursing, I think, will be core skills, Bella.
Core. Okay.
Yeah, it just depends on how they formulate the list for the core as to whether or not we go essential skills or core skills. But I think from the language in the document, the design of it is really around the care industries. So, you know, it might be childcare, it could be aged care. I think it'll definitely be disability services as well. So the focus of it will be on that. The issue is we don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet because there's a lot of consultation that they need to have with various stakeholders, but at least they've made this major announcement. And I think it could be really interesting from the point of view of anyone working in those sectors or intending to work in those sectors.
So, and this will, I mean, they're planning this for 2025. So they're still not.
Yeah, look, and what they've said for 24, they've said that they will finalize the consultation that will guide whatever way they implement the program from the point of view of the essential skills pathway.
And there will be a list, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, don't forget, we can still go with those occupations at the moment, but we need to proceed under a labour agreement in a lot of cases. But by them introducing these occupations into the general way of proceeding, it just makes it a lot easier for people. So hopefully within a year or so, we'll know a lot more about the capacity for people working in those industries in which to get onto this new visa, but obviously then proceed to permanent residency in due course after 2 years.
Cool. I'll just explain that.
Yeah,
entonces, el último como camino, por así decirlo, de las visas de trabajo que se esperan, de las skills, sería el Essential Skills Pathway. Essential. Entonces, en este último es para las personas que tengan un salario entre 50 y 70 mil. Vendría a ser la gente, por ejemplo, que estudia acompañante terapéutico, individual support, aged care, los que hacen el curso de child care, pero child care a nivel educator, no teacher. Entonces, hoy en día vos podés sacar una visa a través de estas ocupaciones, pero se hace a través de acuerdos, como expliqué antes, acuerdos que el gobierno haga con la industria, como en este momento está con la industria de aged care. Entonces, con este nuevo camino se va a poder sacar esta visa con este tipo de ocupaciones de una manera mucho más rápida y fácil. Durante todo el 2024 van a haber consultaciones, o sea, van a consultar y ver cómo hacerlo, y recién sería una realidad para el 2025. Así que es algo positivo para las personas que están estudiando este tipo de ocupaciones. Hay muchísima gente, yo tengo muchos estudiantes haciendo individual support y early childhood education, así que es algo positivo. Como dije, se puede sacar en este momento, pero lo tenés que hacer a través de acuerdos que tiene el gobierno con la industria. Entonces se espera que sea un camino mucho más fácil. Así que es algo bastante positivo para la gente que está estudiando, que tengo muchas personas estudiando este tipo de ocupaciones. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. And I think, what we need to understand is like the intention of the government in terms of bringing in these reforms is to give people, where it's possible, the capacity to move away from being permanently temporary into a permanent visa. So as much as there's very drastic or significant changes in some senses to the student visa space, I think we need to look at it holistically, Bella, and say that they're actually making it easier for a lot of people to move away from those visas and then into skilled visas longer term once studies are finished. I think it's really positive in that respect.
Yeah, I think it's what worries people the most is that, well, it depends on the occupation. You need to go through a whole process, getting the work experience,
I know.
Being recognized in Australia. So at least the case with most of my students, first they come to Australia on maybe like a shorter 6 months, 8 months English course with the plan on then, being able to save and move on to a program that will truly help them. Say a vocational course, like a carpentry course, painting, tiling, or a master degree. So what worries people the most is that if they're not going to be able to transition to a postgraduate visa or the question is, will they have enough time to apply for a skilled visa? Because here's a question that you might, you will be able probably to answer. So, we'll start now on the student visa part. But I know that some of my students will have this question. If they study, for instance, I've got Gaston, for instance. He's studying carpentry, or Angel. He's actually doing a master degree, a quite expensive master degree. So if they can't apply for a postgraduate visa and say they are working in the occupation which they're studying, will they be able to apply for a skilled visa if the work experience they've got is throughout the course? Or the experience that will be recognized is the experience that they achieve after they graduate?
Yeah, look, that's a great question, and unfortunately, it's not something that I can answer yet, just from the point of view that we don't know specifically yet what, if any, experience requirement there will be from the point of view of these new visas as such. So all of the language in the strategy is with a view to allowing students the capacity to be able to move into a skilled visa. And what it does say specifically is that where someone is entitled to a 485 visa, for example, even on a shortened basis, that in itself will give someone the capacity then to move into the new skills and demand visa as such. So whatever way they're going to design it, Bella, will be with a view to recognizing that students won't have the capacity so much easily anymore in which to have that cushion in which to get experience. So I would have to say we don't have the design of the legislation yet in terms of what exactly it's going to look like, but all of the language in this strategy report is that they will make it easier for students to be able to get into this new skills and demand visa as such. So I understand the concern, but I'm sort of optimistic that it's not going to be as big an issue as it seems. But unfortunately, we're just going to have to wait and see exactly what the design of the is,
Cool. And we don't know when, now you'll start on that area, but we still don't know a specific date as to when this.
No, we don't, and like it's, I'll talk about the student situation in a second. And, obviously they've announced really significant changes with respect to the 485 program, concerning accessibility, reducing substantially the age access requirement down to 35, but we don't know yet how they're going to implement that. So, they could implement it from the point of view of affecting all new applications, or they could implement it from the basis of all new applications for people who make student visa applications for the first time this year. So we just don't know. And the thing is, a lot of people here, I guess, this evening and elsewhere, have come to Australia and made applications on the understanding that if they do certain courses, they would be able to then stay longer term on the basis of a 485 visa and beyond. So, it kind of depends on what the transition arrangements will be as to what they do. I'll talk about the student arrangements in a second. I do know for a fact that they're implementing a couple of the changes this week with respect to student visa processing, but those longer term changes concerning 485s will be introduced in 2024. But as to how they affect people will depend on the design of the legislation. We don't know yet.
We don't know yet.
Yeah.
Cool. I'll just say that.
Yes, sorry, that's just a bit long-winded, but that's the reality, unfortunately, So,
yeah. Bueno, entonces, obviamente que una de las cosas que más preocupa a los estudiantes, por lo menos a la mayoría que está acá, que son estudiantes míos, es qué va a pasar con la visa, la postgraduate visa, por ejemplo. O sea, cuando ahora él va a hablar específicamente de la visa de estudiantes, pero lo que yo le pregunté específicamente es qué va a pasar con la gente que está haciendo los oficios que te dan la postgraduate visa, las maestrías que te dan la postgraduate, la visa de trabajo para seguir trabajando una vez que estudias. ¿Qué va a pasar con eso, con esas personas si estos cambios se convierten en una realidad? Todavía la legislación no se sabe si la gente, se supone que la gente que ya esté estudiando no va a tener problemas y va a poder sacarlo. Lo más probable es que sea para nuevas aplicaciones de visa de estudiantes, pero todavía la legislación no está. Se espera que sea para 2024, pero todavía no está y no saben qué va a decir. Lo que sí piensan que va a pasar, o sea, lo que quiere inmigración es que uno no sea un estudiante eterno. Como yo siempre digo, cuando a mí me escriben y me dicen, Vela, generalmente con el estudiante latino no me pasa mucho con el español, que me dice, voy a sacar la visa de negocios, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, están 6 años en Australia estudiando business, que no te sirve de absolutamente nada a nivel vocacional, y cuando se dan cuenta, dice, perdí 5 o 6 años en Australia cuando podría haber estudiado por 2 años algo que realmente me sirva. Lo que inmigración no quiere es que uno sea el estudiante eterno. Entonces se espera que con estos cambios, por ahí no vas a poder sacar la 485, pero vas a estar en condiciones de pasar a una Core Skills Pathway o una Essential Skill o cualquiera de las Skill Pathways. La idea es que puedas transicionar rápidamente a una Skill Visa más que estar siempre en una visa de estudiantes, que en realidad es el objetivo de la mayoría. Nadie quiere, como siempre digo yo, nadie elige la visa de estudiantes porque le encanta estudiar. Todos eligen la visa de estudiantes porque no le queda otra opción. Entonces, nada, esto es lo que preocupa a la mayoría y la legislación todavía no está escrita, así que no sabemos. Vamos a saber, ya se van a implementar desde este mes cambios con la visa de estudiantes. En realidad lo que más es en el processing time, o sea, que aprueben más rápido. Pero, bueno, ahora va a hablar específicamente de la visa de estudiante, pero muchos de los cambios los tiraron ahí, pero todavía no se sabe exactamente cuándo y cómo va a ser la legislación de estos nuevos cambios, que es lo que preocupa a la mayoría. Yes, Richard, go ahead.
Okay, and there is specific, and I know, look, it's just a strategy document, it's not a piece of legislation, but there is specific language in the strategy document that says that a student graduate that's actually working in a skilled occupation will be able to transition to this new skilled and demand visa. So that would indicate to me that there will be less of an experience requirement with respect to the capacity of people to go into that specific visa. So hopefully, that's promising from the point of view of people being able to do that, Bella.
Cool, perfect.
Okay. Okay, so are we okay to just move on to student visas? Because I'm just conscious of the time and I don't want to kind of overwhelm people with information, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's all right.
Like, yeah. Now, obviously, there's been really big changes with respect to student visas being foreshadowed. Most of those changes will occur in 2024. There will be one direction apparently issued imminently by the government with respect to the processing of student visas. I'm not sure if you've heard about it yet, Bella, as such, but basically, depending on the profile of the education provider in question, if it's perceived to be a low-risk provider, that means we get quicker processing. It was kind of that way anyway before, but it's just...
To be honest, when I talk to my students, I always tell them, I feel like these student visa changes for me, as an agent, has to be much changed because my students know that I'm extremely strict with the process. Like, I will not process a visa application, a student visa application, if I consider that visa has a risk of being disapproved. Like, I'm always strict with the process. So I feel like in this, and I always tell my students, you need to go for a provider, a level 1 provider that immigration will know that you're applying for that visa because you genuinely want to study, not just going for the lowest course, like lowest paid course, just to get a visa. So
exactly.
So I did read that and I thought, oh, that's great. And I know, like, unfortunately, there's so many student agents out there that don't do the job properly, which really frustrates me because I do the job right. And it pisses me off when I get people that, they come with a visa refuse. And I'm like, why did they process your visa this way? So I think it's a change that it's positive.
I think it is.
Sorry.
I think it is, and I think an even bigger one, and I know this from dealing with you previously, is that from my conversations with you, it's always been the case that you're looking at the value educationally to the student as well. So as much as I've heard in the last week people saying, oh, the international student sector is dead because of these changes. It's not true at all. It's still very much alive. So, I think the main thing that I would try and get across to people is that if you are reapplying for another student visa, they will consider more carefully the value of the course to you. So it's super important that if you are applying for a new course, that you pick something that's going to be of value to you educationally. And I know you did that anyway, Bella, in terms of my chats with you previously. So it's just a case of, making sure that we pick something that, we can make a pitch to say that it's going to serve you longer term in terms of your skills and experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm known for writing the best TP letters. I'll send you one. I'll send you one some days. My students tell me that I should be a writer. But I guess that's the thing, and I'll explain that in Spanish now.
Thank you.
I think it's a very important change, I believe. Entonces, uno de los cambios más importantes que, como yo le decía a Richard, como todos los que están acá, que son estudiantes míos, saben, yo soy extremadamente exigente con el proceso de visa y los requisitos que tienen que cumplir para que esa visa sea aprobada. Entonces, todos los que hicieron esa primer visa conmigo, y bueno, la mayoría la segunda, una de las cosas que yo siempre digo es muy importante, sobre todo los que están en Argentina, elegir bien la escuela, que esa escuela sea reconocida, que esa escuela tenga un buen nivel migratorio. Inmigración, uno de los cambios que van a hacer para el 2024 es realmente mirar la escuela donde uno está estudiando. Si son, como saben, yo le conté a muchas personas, muchas escuelas cerraron en los últimos años o inmigración les cerró. Típico esas cosas que ponen en Facebook, la gente que vende para agencias, venía a estudiar a esta escuela online y no te vas a tener que preocupar con estudiar, escribime por privado que te cuento. Hay un comentario que está yendo en este momento ahí en la página de Facebook de Gold Coast. Entonces, esos educadores que técnicamente no tendrían que estar haciendo eso, o sea, esas escuelas muchas las cerraron, inmigración se va a poner más exigente con eso. Entonces, uno de los cambios va a ser, que es lo que decía Richard, que es en cierta manera lo que yo siempre le digo a mis estudiantes, pero que van a dar prioridad, sobre todo en el tiempo de cuán rápido te van a aprobar la visa. Saben muchos, por ejemplo, los que estudian con International House, que es un muy buen instituto, reconocido. Pasa con Gold Coast Learning Center, que si bien no ha tenido las mejores referencias, sigue siendo de los reconocidos. Imagine Education, Instituto o Lexis, institutos académicos, institutos que tienen un buen rating migratorio. Entonces yo le aplico a la visa y en una semana las aprueban. Entonces van a estar mirando realmente a los, van a estar muy exigentes con los institutos. Muchos estudiantes ahora me han escrito para extender la visa, que yo le digo, no puede haber más ese gap de 8 semanas, que antes no pasaba nada, antes podía estar 3, 4 meses hasta que empezaba tu curso, no te decía nada. Ahora el instituto te dice no, porque inmigración está así con una lupa encima mío. Entonces los institutos se van a poder poner más exigentes y van a aprobar más rápido las visas si vos estudias con estos institutos que tienen bajo nivel de desaprobación de visa, que son reconocidos. Y otra cosa que es lo que yo le digo a todos, yo más que nadie entiendo la situación del alumno internacional, la situación de mis estudiantes que me mandan su recibo de sueldo con lo que cuesta, y yo que estoy en este momento en Argentina de vacaciones, lo difícil que está, sobre todo Argentina. Algo que yo siempre digo, tenés que pensar bien cómo vas a extender esa visa y con qué curso para que inmigración te crea las intenciones. Todos los que me escriben y me dicen, sacame ese de business porque es el más fácil, porque me escribió mi amigo brasilero que hizo project management y le aprobaron la visa y no hay ningún problema. Y yo le digo, ¿cuándo le aprobaron la visa? El año pasado te aprobaron la visa con los ojos cerrados. Desde hace 2 meses inmigración volvió a lo que era antes del 2019. Van a chequear el programa que vos vas a estudiar y si consideran que vos realmente estás sacando este programa porque te va a agregar valor académico y profesional, o simplemente porque estás encontrando una manera de poder extender tu visa y quedarte más tiempo en Australia. Entonces, más que nunca, esto va a ser una realidad, esto va a ser en el 2024, así que, como le decía Richard, yo no me preocupo porque por lo menos los estudiantes que yo le hago la visa, yo soy muy exigente con este proceso, y es lo que yo le digo a todos. Si vos querés seguir y hacer eso, hacelo. Lastimosamente yo no te puedo ayudar porque yo no quiero que un estudiante mío le nieguen la visa. Así que eso va a ser muy importante a tener en cuenta. Yes, Richard.
Yeah, so look, you know, as much as there's a lot of people really concerned about these changes, I actually think they're really good. I think that we need to kind of look at it holistically, and as much as, you know, they're certainly making it harder for certain aspects of the student visa program to get other student visas, you know, where we're doing the right thing, and as we do in this case, and where we're applying for courses that are of value educationally, I don't have any concerns with it. Certainly, there are changes being introduced to the 485 program that will affect people, but I think we need to look at it in the context that we may have separate pathways to this new skills and demand visa anyway. So, you know, I've been doing this for many years. There's always been a lot of changes in this jurisdiction over many years. People have said previously, oh, these major changes, the world is going to end and that sort of stuff, and it hasn't happened. I would see these changes as being really positive and hopefully giving people more options than they actually do at the moment in which to transition to permanent residency longer term. Okay, sorry, I better stop there. Bella, did you want to translate that, or are you okay with it?
Oh, no, in a way, it's what you said. I already did tell them.
Okay,
sí,
perfect. Thank you.
Que en realidad los cambios que se esperan, si bien para muchas personas piensan, por lo menos ahora, que es una estrategia y todavía no es una legislación, se siente como que es el fin del mundo, pero realmente, por lo menos con lo que se está leyendo de la legislación, realmente con esa letra chica, es como que el objetivo es que se pueda pasar, que si bien por ahí se va a poner más complicada la 485, va a haber como un camino para que vos puedas pasar más rápidamente a una skill visa. Así que siempre ha pasado esto, siempre viene un nuevo gobierno, una nueva estrategia, una nueva legislación. Se siente como el fin del mundo, pero que se espera, por lo menos con el material que se tiene hoy en día, que haya una luz ahí al final del túnel. Yes.
Okay, so I would imagine. I mean, I'm happy to speak to it, Bella, if you want me to. There's obviously increases in the English language standard with respect to accessing the student visa program. I mean, do you want me to talk about that, or are you okay with it?
Yeah, so I guess my question here, just to make it quick, is when will this be a reality if we know? And what happens if, say, a student apply for a carpentry course, right? Before this changes, and the visa is still in process.
Absolutely.
Will immigration ask them to submit IELTS results, or it will, the old legislation will apply in this case? So I guess those are the most important things.
Great question. So to answer your first question, I am looking directly on my screen that's not sharing at the moment, and it says in early 2024, the government will increase English language requirements for the student and temporary graduate visas. So I would have to say that the change coming in that respect will occur probably in the first quarter of 2024. So I mean, anytime from January to April, I would imagine. To answer your second question, Bella, it is always the case that in circumstances where a legislation change occurs in this way, that if someone has made an application before the legislation occurs, the law that applies at the time the application is the law that applies. So even if a change comes in afterwards, it won't affect an application that's in the pipeline.
Cool. Before I explain that, as you know, many private schools or even universities, if you're in Australia or if you're overseas, instead of asking the students to submit IELTS or Cambridge or TOEFL results, they send a English placement test to check the English level. Will this still be something that schools will be doing, or they will be forced to get students to submit official international languages tests? Do you know if there's anything on that?
It's a good question. From looking at this document in front of me, it appears to be super clear that they're proceeding along a pathway of specific test results being required. They're talking about, IELTS tests of specific amounts. So, in those circumstances, you'd have to assume that they will require formal testing. But again, this is just, a political press release, effectively. It's not a legal document. So we won't know until we actually see the design of any legislation amending the requirements.
Cool. I'll just explain that.
Thank you.
Entonces, una de las cosas que le preocupa a la mayoría es el tema del examen de inglés. Uno de los cambios que dijeron es que iba a subir el nivel mínimo que vos necesitas. Hoy en día es 5.5, por ejemplo, para ser admitido a un curso, por ejemplo, los de gastronomía, carpintería, y bueno, los que necesitas para hacer un bachelor degree o un master degree. Entonces, todavía se espera que este cambio sea de enero a abril, que este requerimiento sea una realidad de enero a abril. Se espera también que las personas que hayan aplicado a estos cursos antes de que cambie la ley, si hicieron un examen de nivelación con el instituto y fueron admitidos, no va a pasar nada porque va a aplicar la legislación anterior. Entonces, lo que tienen que saber, que al final, o sea, que es lo que dice Richard, por el momento esto sigue siendo una estrategia política, por así decirlo. Tiraron que eso es lo que van a querer hacer, pero todavía no es una legislación. Por ahora solamente es una estrategia. Pero la estrategia dice que probablemente de enero a abril, las personas que quieran estudiar cualquier curso que no sea inglés van a tener que presentar. Yo lo que le pregunté a él es, ¿los institutos van a seguir pidiendo el examen de nivelación interno como lo hacen en este momento? Richard lo que contesta es, con la estrategia que tengo delante mío, están siendo bastante claros que lo que van a hacer es, vas a tener que presentar resultados de IELTS o TOEFL o Cambridge o PTE para poder ser admitido. Pero, vuelvo a repetir, sigue todo estando ahí que no sabemos porque todavía no es una legislación, así que hay que estar esperando. Lo que tienen que saber es que si esto se convierte en una realidad va a pasar entre enero y abril. Quiere decir que aquellas personas que vayan a aplicar a este tipo de cursos entre esas fechas o después de esas fechas, lo más probable es que sí tengan que cumplir con ese requisito. Pero a no desesperar hasta que no esté la legislación, hasta que no se aprobada la legislación, por ahora sigue siendo solamente una estrategia. Pero es importante que estudien inglés. Todos sabemos que un resultado de IELTS muchas veces no indica lo que uno realmente sabe, porque si no sos bueno haciendo exámenes, si te pones muy nervioso, no vas a sacar buen resultado. Pero lastimosamente hay que estudiar inglés porque al final del día estamos en Australia o los que están en Nueva Zelanda y el inglés es fundamental para sumar más puntos y para tener un camino más directo a la residencia. Yes, Richard.
Okay, so in terms of what advice I would give people in, I guess, most of the audience's position based on what we think is going to happen is that, and you may have said this already, Bella, my apologies if you had, that I think for everyone to really focus on and work on getting their English language skills up as strongly as possible. I think that will resonate into options down the track if they do that. The second thing that I would recommend is really focus on their studies. If they need to apply for another student visa, it's really important that they get your assistance with respect to making sure that we make quality longer term education choices. And the third thing that I think that people should focus on is also trying to get work experience and work in the area that they're studying in as well, because it seems to be the case that where graduates get that work experience, they'll be given that transition point to this new visa that's coming. So those are probably the three recommendations that I would tell people, not to worry about whatever else they're hearing, just focus on what's in front of them, which is those three things are really important. And if we do that, hopefully we'll be in a really good position in terms of, moving into that visa space longer term for them.
Yeah, that's what I always tell them. I'll just say
thank you.
The part on working, which is, I always tell my students, but I think it's very important. Otra de las cosas que también yo siempre les digo a todos, tratar de enfocarse primero en el inglés y segundo en trabajar en el área que están estudiando, porque lo que se espera es que vos puedas transicionar rápidamente de una visa de estudio a una ocupación para una visa de trabajo. Entonces, aquellos que están estudiando o que están haciendo inglés o que están haciendo un oficio, que están haciendo una maestría, enfocarse en trabajar en lo que están estudiando, porque eso le va a ayudar a luego poder transicionar a una visa de trabajo. Así que yo sé que muchas personas dicen, pasa que estoy ganando más plata en esto. Realmente enfóquense en trabajar en lo que están estudiando, porque van a tener más chances de poder salir de esa visa de estudiantes. Bueno, ahí tengo a Barbie, que estaba trabajando porque estaba muy bien en un área y ahora consiguió un súper trabajo en lo que está estudiando. Le dije también ayer a Gastón que igualmente estaba encaminado, pero eso, tratar de trabajar de lo que están estudiando para poder transicionar rápidamente a una visa de skills, que en base a los cambios que están hablando se espera que eso suceda. Yes.
Okay, perfect.
The age, I think it's the most important thing.
What's that, sorry?
People's age, what's going to happen if you're over 25?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, already they've made a change with respect to making it easier for people over 45 to transition to a 186 visa where those exemptions apply. So, I think we'll just have to wait and see what that looks like in terms of the question of age. Even at the moment, as much as 45 is kind of like a hard threshold for a lot of these applications, there is still exemptions that we can get to in terms of getting around it, so it's not really that critical, but it'll just be interesting to see what happens in that respect. I think what's important in terms of the way that they're going to do this is that they've really indicated that they're going to broaden the base to a whole range of different occupations, and that will allow many more people to move into the program, hopefully, and move away from sort of the concern that they have about being sort of permanently temporary as such, So I think it's a really positive change to come, hopefully, in that respect.
So you reckon that for people over 45, they probably like have more chances in like regional areas?
Yeah. And look, the thing is, I mean, they already do at the moment, so say, for example, someone over 45 that's working in a regional area that's a doctor, like there's an exemption available in terms of the age requirement for them. I realize that not everyone is a medical doctor, but where there's a higher salary paid as well, there is an exemption for people over 45 regardless of where they're located. So look, there's not a lot about age in the document. I think age is definitely something that they're going to have to deal with. There's a lot of noise in the document about Australia's aging population. To write people off at 45 is ridiculous in my view.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, and look, I mean, you would rule a lot of people out, including myself, in terms of being able to apply for visas. You know what I mean? So look, I think there has to be a level of reality in relation to that. So hopefully we will see some changes. But obviously, from their point of view, it is sort of an actuarial calculation based on what people's contribution to the economy and a tax payment would be over a working lifetime. So, where people are working now until 70 and beyond, it makes sense to kind of revisit that question again, because, older people can definitely make a pretty big contribution as they have to, and this is such an expensive country in which to live in. So people are working longer because they have to. So
yeah, exactly.
That will resonate into some changes as well that we will see. So I guess, sorry, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, in regards to, which is another thing that worries most people, is the 35-year gap, age for the 485.
For the 485,
That's still a strategy, not a legislation? When should we expect these changes? Have we got any idea on, like, is there any update on this, like an actual fact, like on this age?
So from what I can see from the document, that will be a 2024 reform, so to speak. But I think what we need to understand with it, Bella, is that it depends on how they implement it. So as much as they're saying it will happen in 2024, it might not affect everyone that's applying for a 485, in 2024. Sometimes they have arrangements that the changes might affect people who have applied for a first student visa for the first time in 2024. So it just depends on how they implement it in relation to transitional measures for the change. So we just don't know yet. I think it'll definitely happen in 24, but whether it will affect everyone in 24 remains to be seen. I think rather than focusing on it as being an exclusionary measure, all of the language in the report is that for people who are over 35, where we can access this new visa arrangement, it's a much better outcome for people to go to than a 485 anyway. So, where we have a graduate that's 42, who's got experience, and we can go to a skills in demand visa, it's a much better outcome than going to a 485. So I think we need to look at that change in conjunction with whatever the new visa is going to look like, because if we can go to the new visa and get onto that and be on a pathway towards getting permanent residency after 2 years, it's probably better than a 485 anyway. So
exactly.
So I just think we just need to wait and see what the design of that is before we kind of cast too much judgment about it. I know it's a big change. It's like, what, a 15-year drop over where it currently is at, you know what I mean? So it's quite significant. But but look, let's just see what happens. And I'm not hugely concerned about it, particularly where there appears to be quite generous new pathways being created with respect to this new skills and demand visa that might make it more attractive for people to look at that anyway,
Cool. I'll just explain that.
Yeah, thank you.
Con respecto a lo que también le preocupa a muchísima gente, es el tema de la edad, de los 35 años, para lo que es la postgraduate visa. De vuelta, no hay, sigue siendo estrategia, no está la legislación, se espera este cambio para el 2024, todavía no se sabe, lo más probable es que afecte a las personas que hagan nuevas aplicaciones de visa de estudiantes, no a las personas que ya hayan empezado, pero todavía no hay nada garantizado. Aún así, como lo dije anteriormente, y lo acaba de decir Richard, con esta nueva estrategia de skills, la essential skills, la core skills, con los nuevos caminos migratorios que están armando, se espera que quizás sea mucho mejor ir directamente a una de estas visas que a una 485. Una 485 volvió a 18 meses. Muchas veces, una de las cosas que muchos están quejando hoy en día es que en 18 meses ni siquiera llegás al tiempo suficiente para poder sumar los puntos necesarios para poder ser nominado, por ejemplo, por un estado, responder a la pregunta de Barbie y no tener que depender de un sponsor. Entonces, de vuelta, lastimosamente no hay nada específico, nada garantizado. Es una reforma que se espera para el 2024, pero se espera que si no podés ir por esa opción, puedas llegar a ir por alguna de las skill pathways que hay. Obviously, in regards to applying for like being nominated by a state, that's still going to be the case.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you have,
Yeah.
they don't know, I mean, we don't know what they're going to be called or if they're going to try to reduce the amount of.
No, that's, you know, there's no indication whatsoever that is stopping. In fact, all they've said is that they're going to rejig or reform the points test. And the manner in which they're going to reform the points test, Bella, is on the basis of not just looking at people in relation to educational, you know, and occupational experience and things like that, but also looking at, you know, the social contribution that people can make to an area. So I think where that's the case, where they're looking more at the value of people individually rather than just sort of units of production, it might be the case that we're able to score much higher in a points test for a 491 visa or a 189 or something like that, depending on how they change it, of course. So all of that will remain, most definitely. What they have said they're going to stop is what's called the BIIP program, so the Business Innovation and Investment Program. That's like the 188, 888 visa. So they're stopping that and redesigning it into a new kind of investment and innovation visa. Yeah, they're also going to redesign the global talent visa. I'm not sure if you've come across that one, but it's a visa for international talent as such. So they're making that much more focused on basically the very highest echelons of talented people worldwide in which to come in. So that's where most of the change is going to be. I've heard absolutely nothing, and there's nothing in the document around those skilled independent programs being changed.
So I guess, in your opinion, it's what we always say. Would you say that people should, those that have no other choice than continuing studying, at least this is the advice I give my students, and I guess you'll agree, would you say that they should try to focus on the priority list on the state where they want to study or the occupation they want to study to maybe have more opportunities? Like, for instance, someone that's an architect and they want to continue studying and they want to do, say, I don't know, civil engineering. Would you say that maybe they should check where that occupation is on a priority list, for instance, Western Australia, and try to maybe study there? What would your advice be in regards to, okay, what should I study or where should I study?
Yeah, like it's a tough one because, you know, making a decision like that sort of just focuses on, you know, a capacity to be able to access those three visa programs like the 189, the 190, and the 491. Obviously, we will have a situation next year where we'll have new visa programs that are not entirely governed by occupations lists. So, you know, there'll be a much broader capacity, I think, for people to make decisions about where they live and things like that. But I think as a general rule of thumb, it still makes sense to make educational choices around the location that you're at and what options it gives you from an independent visa perspective, because it's good to not necessarily tie yourself down to a particular option, but to keep as many options open as possible. So, you know, definitely nothing wrong with looking to study in Western Australia. They have a really interesting and attractive program with respect to attracting and keeping students who study in that state. In the VET sector, for example, it's much more sort of progressive than the Queensland arrangement. So I think, yeah,
South Australia as well.
Yeah, South Australia as well,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, and the thing is, there's nothing wrong with doing that, because at the end of the day, you're still pursuing a quality education outcome that could give you an option from the point of view of an independent visa. And, if something comes up in the meantime in terms of this new visa, well, maybe we can jump onto that as well. It's about having as many options as possible and, proceeding that way with it. I think we definitely need to have a strategy, and being aware of where you study and what that offers you in terms of longer term independent options is really important as well.
And would you say that they should truly consider? I mean, I've got lots of students working in their occupation, like professional occupation in Sydney, in Melbourne, in Adelaide, Brisbane, Gold Coast. Would you say that it'd be a good idea to try to, especially if they're older, to try to move away to a regional area? Because obviously the government, what they're trying to do is to get people out of the bigger cities. I mean, the most important city.
Yeah, definitely. Look, it's a tough one to advise at this stage without actually knowing what the design of the program is going to be, but look, it's a very strong message in the report that regional Australia will be a focus, and there will be concessions in terms of that program there. So, I think it's more likely to be the case that people will have options in the regions, but I think I'd probably just reserve judgment on it until we see exactly what the program is going to look like. Because, we just don't want people moving to a place and then finding that they're stranded from the point of view of an option and things like that, but definitely having that flexibility. There's certain states anyway, as that are classed entirely as being regional. So, Western Australia, South Australia, I think, so there's a lot more flexibility in those places. We don't necessarily have to move to a super regional location in those places, but just being mindful of where you're studying and what that might offer you, and getting work experience is really, really important. And of course, working on that English are the really great things that you can do to sort of maximize your prospects. And, for me, I like when someone comes to me that has a number of different strings to their bow, because it just then allows me to look at different options for them. Whereas if we just have one option, if that option is not workable, we're then kind of restricted in terms of what we can do. So I think having that sort of mindset of choosing something from the point of view of it giving you longer term options educationally and from a skill perspective is always sensible.
Cool. So anything else, because I know it's late, and
absolutely. So look,
if there's anything else that you would like to add, obviously I guess we'll have to do another soon year, because I guess once the strategy becomes a legislation, you'll have more idea, and obviously you'll be able to advise
absolutely
properly on these changes. But if there's anything else that you consider important for people to know before we finish.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would say, just to repeat what I've said previously, I don't think people should stress. I think that these changes need to be looked at holistically. I actually think they're really positive, and they could give you actually quite a lot of options, more than we have at the moment. As soon as I see the design of the legislation with respect to all of the changes that are happening, I'm happy to stay in touch with you, Bella, and we'll organise further sessions with respect to the 485 changes, the new skills and demand changes, so that we can then provide sort of more tailored advice with respect to people. But don't stress, just focus on work, your studies in English, and obviously if you need to apply for another student visa, well then do so in a manner that's going to give you the maximum educational outcome, and Bella can help you with that, and I think we'll be fine. So let's stay in touch, but don't stress about these things. Don't be distracted by a lot of the noise that's coming out concerning these things on social media. It's not as bad as it seems. It's actually quite positive in my estimation anyway. So let's see exactly what it looks like.
And you reckon that there will still be updates before Christmas? I mean, well, it's the 20th of December. So
I know. I think the only thing
news before the new year, or
I know. Look, I doubt it. I think the only thing that's going to happen before Christmas is the introduction of that first ministerial direction with respect to student visa processing based on the risk level of the education provider. That's the only thing I think that will happen. And, we know about that anyway. It's sort of always been there. It's just more of an issue. And I think it'll help your students anyway, realistically, given the education providers that you work with. So, but as soon as there's anything else major, like I'll stay in touch with you and we can have another session with everyone here so that we understand what we're facing and whether we need to course correct based on that,
Oh, sounds great. If you want to write down your email, if anybody wants that paper that you summarize.
Yeah, thank you. That would be great. Will I put that into the chat box or something like that? Or?
I don't think so. No, it's just, in the chat box, if you just write your email.
Yeah, just
so people can contact you. Richard va a poner su mail si alguien quiere que le mande el resumen. La realidad es que no se espera ningún otro cambio más que van a tratar de apresurar el proceso de toma de decisión de la visa de estudiantes. Así que lastimosamente no hay mucho, apenas haya una realidad de algo que sepamos, ok, esta estrategia, esto sí se convirtió en legislación, yo me voy a asegurar de hablar con Richard para que, o con cualquiera, o ustedes pueden hablar con cualquier persona profesional, traten de no seguir las noticias de social media que solamente hacen que vos hagas el clic ahí y que en realidad no te dicen nada y que solamente te asustan. Por ahora, como dije al principio, sigue siendo una estrategia. Sí hay varios cambios que se esperan para el 2024. Sí va a ser importante que mejoren su nivel de inglés. Sí va a ser importante los que no le queda otra que estudiar y extender la visa de estudiantes, como yo siempre digo, hacer estudios que se pueda justificar genuinamente por qué ustedes quieren estudiar eso y no simplemente un curso para tratar de extender la visa, porque esos van a ser los cursos, esas van a ser las aplicaciones que van a ser más risky, que van a estar en riesgo porque inmigración, ya de este mes yo noté un cambio en inmigración en cuanto a la toma de decisiones. He tenido casos de estudiantes que cuando mandé la visa le dije, mirá, que estás complicado con este tema, fíjate que venís cambiando de trabajo cada 2 o 3 meses, recomiendo esperar unos meses más para aplicar tu visa. No, aplicame la visa. Y noté, por ejemplo, con 2 casos que inmigración le escribió diciendo, ok, demostrame fondos económicos. Estoy hablando de gente que está en Argentina. Mientras que en todo este año yo hice 356 visas llevo este año, no he tenido problema con ninguna visa, menos de Argentina, de Chile, sí se puso inmigración más complicado con Perú, Ecuador, Colombia, Venezuela, sí se puso más complicado con la gente mayor de 45 años, cosa que antes no era así. Así que apenas tengamos novedades, como ustedes saben, voy a tratar de que la información real y profesional esté disponible sobre todo para mis estudiantes, pero no desesperen, no hay mucho que podamos hacer ahora, porque todavía sigue siendo una estrategia y no una legislación, así que hay que estar atento a ver qué pasa. Pero sí, el inglés, fundamental. Y bueno, los que son mayores de 35 años, sobre todo, y todos en realidad, tratar de trabajar en lo que están estudiando, o de la experiencia real que tienen o de los estudios que tienen en Argentina para poder transicionar rápidamente a una visa de skills si se pone complicado el tema de la edad para la visa de estudiantes. Richard, I'll let you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For your time.
My pleasure. Yeah,
and your,
my pleasure.
The way you explain things, I love how you talk.
Because
you explain everything so calmly, something that I'm not like that, as you can tell. I've got too much energy.
Oh, no.
So yeah, thank you so much for your time, and
my pleasure. My pleasure.
Hopefully next time we'll have more detailed information and positive.
Yeah, I think it's all positive. So let's stay in touch, and I look forward to presenting again. And obviously, like to wish everyone a very happy Christmas and New Year, and look forward to seeing you in the new year.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bueno, a todos, buenas noches para todos. Vayan a dormir. Gastón, ponete la alarma porque tenemos que pagar tu visa. Bueno, la mayoría ya creo que por lo menos los que están conectados no tengo que preocuparme. Recuerden, yo me voy de vacaciones del 7 al 27. Hace 3 semanas no tengo vida porque hay muchos estudiantes que me estuvieron mandando sus cosas con mucha demora, así que he tenido que hacer visas en 24 horas porque o si no se le vencía la visa. Los institutos cierran el 22 de diciembre, la mayoría abre mitad de enero, así que si ya no logré conseguir su COE, va a estar muy complicado conseguirlo. Así que lastimosamente creo que estamos todos bien, pero me voy a tomar vacaciones. Realmente quiero tratar de no trabajar del 7 al 27. Al 27 vuelvo a Australia, así que ya los visitaré a todos por Australia. O si no, bueno, hablaré. Pero bueno, sí realmente necesito tomarme vacaciones porque estoy agotada porque no paré de trabajar, sobre todo estas últimas 3 semanas que estoy en Argentina. No he tenido tiempo de respirar con la cantidad de extensiones de visa. Así que bueno, tranquilos, seguramente algo vamos a poder hacer. Positivos, pónganse a trabajar, pónganse a ahorrar. Y nada, seguramente algo se va a poder hacer. Vuelvo a repetir, por ahora sigue siendo una estrategia, no una legislación. Y como dijo Richard, y como lo puse en el grupo de WhatsApp de estudiantes, gran parte de todo esto es un tema político. Así que bueno, buenas noches, buen fin de año, nos vemos el año que viene para Australia. Beso grande, chau, chau.